Why you don't get to talk about it on the pod?
It gets stepped on when we bring it up. Certain things that
That the streets into.
yeah, that they're not into.
Or what's more likely is the things that actually interest some of you, y'all just don't speak about.
No, the things I'm telling you, the things that we do speak about that interest us, when they don't interest everybody else on the pod, certain people, it gets stepped on and overlooked. So we don't.
But the name of that bullet.
Joe Budden. Joe Budden.
Yeah, but you want to play around with it. I'm serious with him. His lack of effort, he want to use this bull narrative that it gets stepped on. Don't nobody step on your show initiative. If you want
It's
to
not lack of effort. We're not going to do that. There's things that I bring up. It's not lack of effort, Joe. It's just
I've been begging y'all to have a decent conversation about Love Island for weeks.
Joe, I'm not even talking about love. I'm talking about things that interest. If it's
It's
interest
only
to
the biggest show out. I ain't watching it. These love it. I throw to Elliot. They didn't want to talk about it. Don't say Joe Budden step on. I learned how to shut the up. That's something I had to learn to do. I've learned how to do it. So now, those that need to learn how to show initiative, show some initiative. If you like Kanan, talk about Kanan.
All right, we'll see.
Okay.
But you see, there's a thing. There's a reason why. It ain't just me. There is a reason why. To answer your question, certain things don't get brought.
Joe Budden finally snaps at Ice during a heated behind-the-scenes confrontation that had apparently been building for months. Yeah, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with the podcast or paying close attention to what's been happening behind the scenes, Joe Budden finally made it clear exactly how he feels about Ice's contributions to the show. And honestly, this turned into a pretty revealing conversation about the creative tension happening inside one of the biggest shows in hip-hop podcasting history. It's right up there with The Breakfast Club. Now, I already know some people are going to say The Breakfast Club is much bigger. And in many ways, that's absolutely true. But when it comes specifically to podcasting, this show is still one of the biggest players in the entire space. So the cast starts discussing what they're planning to talk about on the show, and you can immediately see that Joe's expression is changing. He looks irritated. He looks frustrated. Then he finally says, "Oh, we're going to bring this up, and y'all aren't going to say a damn thing about it." So from my perspective, it appears that certain members of the show are pushing for specific topics to be discussed. But once the conversation actually begins and it's time to go deeper, they don't bring much substance to the table. And then I starts explaining that Joe will basically step on the topic, avoid fully engaging with it, and make it seem like the subject isn't even worth discussing. He also claims Joe will say the audience doesn't want to hear about it and then try to move on from the conversation. But Joe raises the temperature even more and starts accusing Ice of not putting in enough effort. Oh my god, y'all, this is where things start getting seriously uncomfortable. Joe is practically suggesting that Ice is being lazy. And at this point, man, the gloves are completely off. Especially when you look at the last few weeks, everything eventually led to Joe Budden calling out both Ice and Ish for allegedly struggling to tell compelling and interesting stories.
I expect podcasters, all, not just y'all, to extract something interesting. As a podcaster, it should be your job to kind of extract what is interesting.
But what'll happen is you'll get here and as in the middle of telling your story, when everybody starts laughing and kiki-keying and all of that other shit, it stops you from telling your story. It does it to everybody in here outside of Joe, because when Joe's telling the story, we may not do that.
It's not that.
I'm not saying you can't live.
That's their little crutch they be using.
I don't.
But at what point is it your job to find the funny things that you would say on camera? I call it willing to do your job, but what do I know?
So now we arrive at this behind the scenes episode, and you know, Joe has reached the point where his frustration is boiling over. The on-air conversations have started becoming extremely tense, and that conversation Joe had with Ish and Ice during the last Patreon episode was especially ugly. It felt almost like an HR meeting, with Joe Budden using language that was incredibly inflammatory. It's like if you were at your own workplace and your boss said something along the lines of, you know, the type of thing you're supposed to be doing is simply doing your job, but what do I know? And then on top of that, they accuse you of showing a lack of effort. At that point, you might start wondering whether it's time to find another job. But honestly, I think Joe Budden feels like Ice has had years and years of coaching, including Joe himself constantly defending Ice and insisting that he's a really good podcaster and one of the best in the business. And now, after all this time, Joe may finally be seeing what everybody else has been seeing. At the end of the day though, this is what happens when frustration keeps building. And to be fair, I think Ice made some legitimate points. Joe Budden does sometimes interrupt stories, and he has this strange habit where if something doesn't interest him personally, he immediately assumes the entire audience must feel the same way. But I have to be honest, when has Ice ever really told a truly compelling story by himself? Usually, when the stories become interesting, it's because a Joe Budden, a Mark, or a Flip helps bring the energy to the conversation. And that's probably why Joe thinks certain stories are boring. For example, Power is easily one of the strongest shows in the entire Power universe to me, including the original series. The acting is great, from characters like Rack, Unique, and Breeze, and the show is packed with storylines. Even the Italian characters are bringing serious energy to the series. So there is absolutely enough material there for them to have a great conversation about it, but somehow it doesn't always come across that way on the podcast. And now, on top of that, they also have the Power prequel where a young Ghost and Tommy are beginning to build their empire. And honestly, I don't know if I completely trust the podcast crew to carry that conversation on their own. So the next few episodes could get very interesting when Ice attempts to let a story, because Joe is going to have to let him cook. He can't immediately shut him down, turn it into a joke, or embarrass him. Especially because Ice's hesitation seems connected to Joe Budden's presence, his constant coaching, and the lack of confidence that comes from being repeatedly corrected. Look at Charlemagne on The Breakfast Club when Lauren or Jess says something completely ridiculous or out of pocket. Charlemagne usually doesn't destroy them. He might say, "Oh, come on, man, that didn't happen," and then keep the conversation moving. But the way Joe corrects people is much more aggressive and heavy-handed. And then, on top of that, the Joe Budden podcast fan base often takes the narratives Joe introduces and starts repeating them as if they came up with those opinions themselves. Now, me personally, I don't even know what to make of this situation. I can understand where Ice is coming from. You just have to sit back and observe, man. Joe clearly enjoys messing with people. He likes pushing buttons. He's almost like Logan Roy from Succession, where those wealthy people would play psychological games with everyone around them. Remember that early season moment when they told that kid, if you hit a home run, we'll give you $1 million or something ridiculous like that? Knowing the kid probably couldn't do it and was struggling financially? That's the kind of psychological game Joe seems to enjoy playing with his cast members. He puts these guys through the pressure cooker and constantly tests them. But I honestly don't know if Joe is mature enough to let Ice tell a story without immediately interfering. And I'm not just talking about letting him tell the story. I'm talking about allowing him to struggle. Let him struggle, let him make mistakes. And don't constantly highlight every single moment where he's struggling, because that's how somebody eventually improves. I don't know if Joe is capable of doing that. Joe is very good at taking a finished product and making it look polished. But I'm not sure he knows how to develop someone like Ice, who still clearly needs to grow, without making him look even worse in the process. But let me know what you guys think about this behind-the-scenes confrontation. What do you think Joe should do from here? Because, Joe doesn't really seem like the type of person who wants to deal with direct conflict.